I had been warned, of course. HR's little hollow poster glared at me every morning. Never touch sentience. Never. Ever. I'd muttered something about excessive caution, but honestly, how bad could a gentle head pat be? One quick stroke to calm a stressed alien wouldn't hurt anyone, least of all me. That was the logic, anyway, as I wandered down the main corridor of Station Gamma 7, coffee in one hand, multi-tool jangling in the other, blissfully unaware of the chaos brewing just a few meters ahead. She was sitting cross-legged in the maintenance bay, tail curled neatly around her legs, ears flicking back and forth like radar dishes. I had seen her before, tall, wolf-like, fur shimmering silver with streaks of midnight blue, but today she looked particularly unpleasant. A scowl wrinkled her snout, claws tapping a warning rhythm on the metal floor. I swear, she wasn't just annoyed, she was radiating. Do not approach or risk losing a limb. My curiosity, and perhaps a little misplaced bravado, got the better of me. I knelt slightly, hand hovering for just a fraction longer than appropriate, and gave her a gentle pat on the head. There. Emotional support, I muttered. Her reaction was instantaneous. A stiffening of shoulders, a low rumble vibrating through her chest. I froze, wondering if I'd just committed some universal faux pas. And then she leaned into it. Her ears flattened, tail flicked with approval, and that rumble shifted into something more personal. I blinked. I had no idea what I had just unlocked. By the time I registered that she wasn't snarling at me, but instead snapping her gaze toward the first approaching crew member, it was too late. Stay back, she growled, low and dangerous, teeth flashing. The poor technician froze mid-step, hands raised in panic. HR had not prepared me for this level of territorial enforcement. I stepped back, hands raised, trying to explain. I didn't mean anything. I was just offering, moral support. The alien woman blinked slowly at me, ears twitching, as if approving my explanation in the most ambiguous. I'll allow it for now. Sort of way. Meanwhile, the technician behind me edged backward like a terrified cat, mumbling something about human dominance subroutines. It soon became apparent that I had activated what she apparently called her loyalty protocol. She had a very particular understanding of touch, one that apparently didn't just acknowledge me, it claimed me. And everyone else? Off limits. Head pats, I now realized, carried far more meaning than I had ever anticipated. Things escalated quickly. Cleaning drones whirred past, innocently attempting to sweep the floor. She growled. The medics rounding the corner to check on a routine reactor panel? Growled again. Even security officers, usually immune to social nuances, stopped in their tracks, claws half raised, ears back, snarling at anyone who dared get too close. I began to suspect this wasn't just possessive behavior, but a full-blown station-wide protocol violation cascade, all triggered by my apparently scandalous gesture. I tried to negotiate. Okay, she's calm now. See? Totally fine. Just don't move. My words were lost on the vibrating rumble of her chest and the subtle curl of her tail, which now seemed capable of tipping over anything unlucky enough to cross her line of sight. Her eyes met mine, a silent acknowledgement that the power dynamic had shifted. I was no longer simply a human among aliens. I had inadvertently become the center of a very particular kind of attention economy, and she was the enforcer. Exaggeration became the new normal. She followed me wherever I went, silent except for the occasional warning growl aimed at coworkers, medics, and anyone within 10 meters. I drank my coffee cautiously, muttering to myself about how this was supposed to be a minor station task, not a full-blown security crisis. Each time a crew member tried to speak to her, or worse, me, she would snap her gaze and rumble low. I learned quickly to interpret subtle cues. A twitch of an ear meant caution, a flick of the tail meant imminent growl, and a soft nudge of her head meant, "Only I may touch or administer affection." The humor in the situation, I admitted grudgingly, was hard to miss. HR's hollow poster warnings were laughable now. They had imagined compliance, obedience, and maybe a polite nod. What they hadn't foreseen was that a single, innocent head pat could trigger a cascading chain reaction of possessive, territorial behavior, replete with innuendo and implied authority that no human manual could ever cover. I realized quickly that the double meanings were unavoidable. "I'm just stroking her confidence," I muttered aloud, earning a low, approving rumble from her. "She only responds to very gentle, specific motions," I added, watching as her tail swept the floor like a cat sweeping away anyone foolish enough to come too close. The subtle adult undertones of the situation, touch, loyalty, control, weren't lost on me, though I kept my voice casual, pretending this was routine protocol. I didn't know it yet, but my life on Station Gamma 7 had changed irrevocably. My casual head pat had elevated me from ordinary human to some sort of unauthorized comfort service administrator, whether I liked it or not. The wolf-like alien woman, growling at anyone else daring to approach, had established a clear and undeniable hierarchy. She followed me with precision, signaling that my inadvertent gesture had consequences far beyond the immediate, far beyond anything HR's training could prepare me for. By the time I left the maintenance bay, careful to avoid stepping on her tail or disturbing her delicate mood, I realized a truth I could not escape. Simple human gestures, gentle, seemingly insignificant touches, could disrupt alien hierarchies, ignite possessive instincts, and produce comedic, slightly risque chaos across an entire space station. And I had done it all before my morning coffee even cooled. So, there I was, the unsuspecting human, accidentally commanding a wolf-like alien woman, surrounded by confused coworkers, buzzing drones, and medics who now regarded me with a mixture of fear, envy, and utter confusion. A single, innocent head pat had redefined my entire station life. And she was still growling. By the next day, the consequences of my little head pat were impossible to ignore. She had elevated herself from a grumpy, aloof alien to a full-blown station enforcer with me at the center of her attention. Anyone approaching me, even for the most mundane reason, received her immediate disapproval in the form of low, menacing growls. The cafeteria staff were the first to discover this. One brave in turn tried to slide a cup of coffee across the counter, and nearly lost a hand when she swiped it back with her tail, ears flat, eyes blazing. "She only responds to my touch," I muttered, pretending to negotiate with her like she would understand my logic, when in reality I was bargaining with instinct and possession protocols I barely comprehended. The technicians weren't spared either. One of them leaned over my shoulder to check the multi-tool I was carrying. She bared teeth in warning, making a low rumble that vibrated through my chest and set every piece of equipment on the workbench to jitter nervously. I stepped back, sipping my coffee like this was normal, which it wasn't. "Apparently head pats are intimate where she's from," I whispered, mostly to myself, as a defense mechanism against the absurdity unfolding around me. It became clear quickly that everyone on the station was recalibrating their behavior around us. Security officers who had always treated me as insignificant now shot nervous glances, sizing up the wolf-like enforcer, knowing full well that she would have none of their authority. Her growls became a universal deterrent. Even the medics, who were usually unflappable, approached only with extreme caution, hovering at a distance and communicating in hushed tones. "Authorized patting only," I joked to myself, though it was increasingly clear this was less a joke than a statement of fact. The humor of the situation was difficult to ignore. HR's little posters suddenly seemed like cruel mockery. "Never touch sentience." The word never took on a whole new, ironic resonance. One small gesture, a brief, gentle pat, had cascaded into a station-wide behavioral shift, the likes of which no training manual could ever predict. I was suddenly the unintended administrator of a service no one had signed up for, the exclusive human-alien comfort protocol. She followed me everywhere, and her tail swept the floor like a living warning sign, knocking over any poor soul who dared approach too closely. As the chaos continued, I had to think fast. A technician tried to ask a question, and she immediately bared her teeth and rumbled like a small engine. I held up my hand and said, "She's fine, I promise. She's just particular about attention." My words carried an adult double meaning I didn't fully intend, And yet somehow, that only made this situation funnier. Crew members whispered behind their hands, glancing between her and me with a mixture of fascination, fear, and amusement. Every small interaction became loaded with suggestive ambiguity. When I passed my hand over her shoulder to steady her while she navigated a narrow walkway, she tilted her head and purred, a sound that made every nearby human freeze and speculate wildly. "She's very responsive to subtle motions," I muttered. "Only I may initiate contact." The station buzzed with gossip, with each observer embellishing what they saw, each adding their own adult interpretation to the growing legend of my accidental authority. The cafeteria became the unofficial proving ground. Anyone trying to deliver food to my table had to navigate the growling sentinel beside me, whose ears twitched with irritation at each approach. I leaned back in my chair, sipping cautiously, and considered posting signs. "Authorized interaction only. Violators may be growled at." The absurdity was delicious. I had turned a minor act of kindness into a station-wide comedy of misunderstandings, full of adult innuendo, exaggerated reactions, and confused coworkers who had no idea they were participants in a farcical social experiment. Even casual human traits were suddenly elevated to absurd importance. My habit of stirring coffee became a strategic move. A simple adjustment of my hand, a flick of a wrist, could either placate or provoke her subtle growls. I had unwittingly mastered an alien behavioral protocol simply by performing mundane human tasks with confidence and flair. Exaggeration of the mundane became my secret weapon, a shrug, a sip, a glance, all interpreted as commands or reassurances by the wolf-like enforcer. HR attempted intervention, of course, but it was comically ineffective. They arrived, floating hollow clipboard in hand, eyes wide. "This is unprecedented," the HR officer stammered. "She's growling at everyone except you." I gave a casual shrug, leaning into the double meaning of my gesture. "I guess I'm just uniquely qualified." Their confusion only deepened when she nuzzled my arm, a gesture that was entirely innocent for her species but loaded with adult implications for everyone watching. By midday, the chaos had reached a crescendo. Medics hovered at a distance, cleaning drones skirted the edges of the room, and security officers flinched at every twitch of her tail. And through it all, I remained calm, sipping coffee and offering occasional head pats. Each pat was precise, deliberate, and interpretively rich, enough to maintain her loyalty, but ambiguous enough to keep everyone else guessing. It was absurd, it was adult, and it was utterly hilarious. I realized something important in the midst of the chaos. Humans, in their casual carelessness and social flexibility, could inadvertently dominate alien hierarchies. A single, well-timed gesture, a gentle head pat, could trigger complex behavioral responses with layers of adult humor and misunderstanding. The station may have had rules, protocols, and security measures, but none of that could account for instinct, loyalty, or the subtle power of touch. By the end of the shift, I had achieved something remarkable. I was both respected and feared, envied and laughed at, all because of one small, impulsive act. The wolf-like enforcer trailed me closely, growling at anyone who came too near, tail swiping furniture and equipment with exaggerated flair. My colleagues whispered, speculated, and tried not to stare too obviously, while I sipped my now cold coffee and marveled at the absurdity of it all. And through it all, I kept one guiding principle in mind: gentle, deliberate, exclusive, and completely under my control. My head pat had changed everything, and I had learned the delicate art of managing chaos, adult comedy, and alien instinct, all without ever raising my voice. The growls around me were less a threat than a comic affirmation. I had inadvertently become the center of a new social order, and it was hilarious. I couldn't help but grin. If this was the consequence of a single pat, I couldn't wait to see what would happen next. HR arrived mid-morning, floating hollow clipboard quivering in hand, and looked at me like I had personally dismantled station policy. "This is highly irregular," the officer said. "She's growling at everyone. Except you." I raised an eyebrow and sipped coffee, careful not to spill. "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied, though the low rumble of her chest behind me suggested otherwise. She sat upright, tail flicking with authority, ears flat in a warning posture that made every nearby human inch backward. The public quickly took notice. Cafeteria patrons whispered, technicians stopped mid-step, and security officers hovered awkwardly, unsure whether to intervene or bow. "Authorized patting only," I muttered under my breath, adjusting my grip on the multitool like I was preparing for an elaborate ritual. Every glance from her reminded everyone around us of the unspoken rule: only I could interact in certain ways. The double meaning was unavoidable. Each touch, each gesture, hinted at something both innocent and scandalously intimate. One in turn tried to ask a question about reactor calibration. She turned toward him, growling low and rumbling in a way that made the floor vibrate slightly. The intern froze, eyes wide, muttering about human dominance and alien behavior protocols. I waved my hand casually. "She's fine. Just very selective about attention." My words were loaded, more for comedic effect than clarity. Everyone watching interpreted them as something else entirely, and the whispers began in earnest. The absurdity grew with every passing moment. Cleaning drones were now avoiding me as though I carried a personal force field. Medics tiptoed around her, hovering their tools like they were delicate instruments rather than standard medical equipment. Security officers, who normally ignored social subtleties, flinched at every tail flick. Even the cafeteria cook stopped mid-serve when she glared, a tray of steaming food trembling in his hands. I leaned back, sipping coffee as though observing a live comedy show. The double entendre in every movement was hilarious. "I'm just stroking her confidence," I said aloud, and she purred faintly, tail brushing a wall in a warning sweep. HR attempted to regain control. "You can't just..." the officer began, but she cut him off with a low, vibrating growl that made the hollow clipboard quiver. "She only responds to me," I explained, shrugging with exaggerated innocence. "It's a very specific protocol." The adult humor was subtle but present. The notion of exclusivity, control, and territorial possession made every observer squirm, laugh, or both. HR's confusion deepened with each passing second, and I could see the gears turning in their head, trying to reconcile policy with instinctual alien behavior. The gossip spread fast. Technicians whispered about how I must have imprinted her loyalty. Cafeteria staff speculated about the only human allowed to administer affection, and medics quietly debated whether I had unknowingly become some kind of exotic trainer. I didn't correct them. The adult double meanings practically wrote themselves, and watching the chaos unfold was its own reward. Each growl, each warning flick of her tail, reinforced the absurdity. A single pat had redefined social order across the station. By midday, the cafeteria had become a theater of exaggerated reactions. Anyone approaching our table had to navigate her growls, tail swipes, and subtle postural threats. I sipped my coffee carefully, adjusting my grip on the cup with deliberate precision. "She's particular," I muttered. "Only I may administer attention." Each word carried the weight of double entendre and adult suggestion, though I presented it with casual detachment. Nearby humans froze, whispered, and speculated, creating a feedback loop of confusion, humor, and intrigue. Unexpected situations continued to escalate. A security officer, emboldened by protocol enforcement, stepped too close to me. Her ears flattened instantly, tail sweeping the floor with exaggerated precision, and the officer stumbled backward, muttering something about misinterpreted social hierarchies. I patted her head gently, murmuring, "See? Only subtle, specific touches work." And she purred faintly. The officer, unsure whether to be impressed or terrified, scurried away, and I sipped my coffee with a smirk. Word spread like wildfire. Crew members now gave us wide berth, adjusting paths, whispering guesses, and speculating wildly. The adult humor was inescapable. Each touch, glance, and movement hinted at something suggestively personal, while remaining ambiguous enough to keep everyone guessing. My casual gestures became a comedy of misunderstandings and exaggerated authority. I realized that humans, in their obliviousness and confidence, could accidentally dominate even the most disciplined alien hierarchies. Even HR gave up trying to intervene directly. Perhaps just monitor, the officer suggested, glancing nervously at her. I raised a hand in casual acknowledgement. Monitoring is easy, I said. I just continue my duties. The adult humor lingered in the phrasing. Duties could mean anything from maintenance work to administering affection, and the station's population wasn't likely to assume the innocent interpretation. The wolf-like enforcer remained by my side, growling at anyone who came too close, tail swiping with authority, ears flicking in calculated warnings, a living, breathing symbol of exclusive access. By the end of the shift, the station had adapted. People moved carefully, whispered in corridors, and avoided approaching us unless absolutely necessary. She remained close, low growls rumbling, tail sweeping, eyes locked on anyone who dared approach me. I had learned to navigate the delicate balance. Precise gestures, careful touch, and subtle commands maintained her loyalty without triggering chaos beyond what was already in motion. The absurdity was undeniable. A single, innocent head pat had created a public spectacle, confused HR, unsettled security, and turned ordinary co-workers into nervous participants in a farcical adult comedy. The double meanings, implied intimacy, and over-the-top reactions elevated mundane station life into a full-blown social experiment. I leaned back, smiling wryly, and sipped my coffee, acknowledging that humans could unintentionally command respect, loyalty, and obedience simply through casual, confident gestures. It was ridiculous. It was hilarious. And it was entirely under my control. Every growl, tail swipe, and subtle lean was a comic affirmation of the new hierarchy I had accidentally established. The adult humor, double meanings, and exaggerated reactions created a station-wide narrative that would be whispered, laughed at, and speculated about for weeks. And through it all, she growled. At anyone else. By the following morning, the station had fully adjusted to the new order I had unintentionally created. She followed me everywhere, low growls echoing at anyone else daring to approach, tail swiping with deliberate flair. It had become a station-wide joke, though nobody dared laugh too loudly for fear of incurring her ire. I moved with calculated confidence, careful not to disrupt her delicate mood, while the staff whispered, gossiped, and speculated wildly about the human who had somehow claimed exclusive access to a wolf-like enforcer. I decided it was time to establish some rules. A gentle, deliberate head pat here, a subtle stroke of her shoulder there. Each gesture was designed to reinforce her loyalty and maintain my authority. Authorized patting schedule, I muttered, imagining it on a memo, though the adult humor in the phrasing wasn't lost on me. She tilted her head, ears flicking in approval, tail curling slightly around my feet like a living seal of compliance. Every gesture carried a layered meaning, innocent touch, affirmation, and just enough suggestive ambiguity to keep everyone else guessing. The cafeteria had become our unofficial headquarters. Anyone attempting to approach for coffee, meals, or casual conversation was met with a low growl, tail flick, or a subtle shift in her stance. I leaned back, sipped carefully, and murmured, "She only softens for specific, gentle contact," knowing the double entendre would resonate with anyone observing. The staff froze, whispered, and adjusted their behavior accordingly, while she maintained her strict enforcement with comedic precision. Security officers still attempted to maintain some semblance of authority, but it was useless. One step too close, and she immediately swiveled on her haunches, growling with exaggerated menace, tail brushing across the floor and knocking over a stack of maintenance manuals. I patted her head lightly, murmuring, "Subtle touches only," and she purred faintly. The officer stumbled back, muttering something about human-alien hierarchy manipulation, and the adult comedy of the situation became even more apparent. Even HR had surrendered. The officer floated by, clipboard trembling, muttering, "Monitor, observe, maintain discretion." I gave a casual shrug, raising my cup of coffee. "Monitoring is easy," I said. "I handle the interactions." The adult double meanings were undeniable, and everyone watching drew their own conclusions. The wolf-like enforcer nudged me gently, ears flicking, tail curling, a perfect combination of compliance and warning. Her behavior reinforced my authority, and my casual gestures, innocent, deliberate, and slightly suggestive, kept the entire station in line. Word of my accidental command spread like wildfire. Technicians whispered in hallways, medics paused mid-task to peek, and cafeteria staff adjusted routes to avoid her sweeping tail. Every touch, every glance, every low growl carried a layered meaning: loyalty, protection, and subtle adult implication. I found it difficult not to chuckle. Humans, in their casualness and confidence, could dominate even the most disciplined alien hierarchies, simply by performing mundane gestures with precision. The absurdity was delicious. By mid-afternoon, a pattern had emerged. I learned to anticipate her reactions, understanding the subtleties of her growls, the flicks of her ears, and the curling of her tail. Each motion was a language of exclusivity and adult nuance. I could guide her, calm her, and maintain control without ever raising my voice. The staff learned too, keeping a respectful distance, whispering speculations, and occasionally daring a glance from afar. The comedy, adult undertones, and HFY theme intertwined seamlessly. Humans could inadvertently disrupt alien social structures with nothing more than casual gestures. I realized my role had evolved. No longer simply a technician, I had become the center of a social experiment I had never signed up for. My gestures controlled behavior, my casual attention dictated loyalty, and my presence alone created a ripple of exaggerated, humorous reactions. Each pat, each subtle stroke, reinforced the rules: only I may administer touch, only I may guide, only I may be the source of comfort. Adult humor lingered in every phrase, every motion, and every observer's whispered speculation. Even routine activities became opportunities for absurd comedy. When I stirred my coffee, she watched, ears flicking, tail curling, growl rumbling faintly. A casual adjustment of my hand could prevent a growl, encourage a purr, or assert dominance, all with subtle adult undertones. The station had unwittingly become a stage for my accidental authority and her exaggerated, humorous enforcement. The juxtaposition of mundane human behaviors against instinct-driven alien reactions created a perfect blend of comedy, HFY, and suggestive humor. By evening, the hierarchy was solidified. The wolf-like enforcer trailed me closely, low growls aimed at anyone else, tail sweeping with precise exaggeration, eyes gleaming with alertness. I sipped my coffee, patting her head lightly, murmuring, "Exclusive access, remember?" Her faint purr was affirmation enough. The double meanings were layered, adult, and perfectly ambiguous. Anyone observing could interpret it innocently or scandalously, which only added to the comedy. I watched coworkers cautiously avoid her, medics hover at a safe distance, and security officers flinch at the slightest movement. The station had fully adapted to the new normal. Humans laughed quietly behind their hands, aliens whispered about loyalty protocols, and the adult double entendres persisted in every subtle gesture. My head pat had transformed a simple human action into a full-blown station-wide comedy of misunderstandings, authority, and subtle adult humor. As I finally leaned back, the absurdity fully sinking in, I realized the truth: humans, in our casual unpredictability and social boldness, could accidentally create order where none existed, command loyalty where instinct ruled, and ignite a cascade of comedic chaos with just a gentle touch. She curled her tail around my feet, ears flicking in approval, growls now softened into a steady rumble that was both a warning and a reassurance. My influence over her, and over the station, was complete. I raised my coffee in a quiet toast to the chaos I had wrought, one pat at a time. She nudged my hand gently, tail sweeping a line of empty trays aside, ears flicking in perfect alignment with my gestures. The adult humor, double meanings, and HFY absurdity all converged. I was both ordinary and extraordinary, human and unavoidably dominant, clever in my casualness, and somehow hilariously in control. And she growled at anyone else.